Okay, Deirdre, thank you so much. Go ahead, please.
Okay, great. So again, we're here tonight to talk to you specifically about the outreach and engagement that we are planning for our Sustainable Airport Master Plan. And we're going to get into some details and make sure you have a schedule update so that you can look ahead and know when that activity will be underway. And then I want to talk with you a little bit beginning now about what an airport master plan is. So as I said, it's a planning process. It looks ahead to what we anticipate would happen, how best we meet it, what might be needed. It's comprehensive across the airport, and it looks at both facilities and then programs or projects that might be needed, as well as a rough estimate of costs. So I've got several bullets on the screen here that just talk about the ways that you refine through planning. And what I've noted before to audiences when I've presented on the master plan is we are working within the existing configuration of the airport. So within the existing 3-runway system, there's no additional runway being contemplated or any large scale expansion of property beyond the boundaries of the airport. And that was direction given to us at the outset of planning by the Port Commission. And I always want to make sure to emphasize that to folks. So Andy, I think you can go to the next slide. This is a very simplified map of our existing facilities at SEA, and the right-hand side of the map is north. So that's not the normal orientation people are used to looking at, but that's how we tend to do our airport maps, and not sure why, but we do. So the top of the map is west. And this map is separated into showing 3 main groups of functions, and they're done by color. So terminal areas are done in blue. Cargo operations are shown in gold or yellow, and airline/airport support, which includes maintenance and hangars. It shows the parking that's in red. And we look at it this way because we need to understand the needs in all of those areas and understand how we would plan to meet the future needs. So it's about what's happening in each of these areas and what's needed for the future. This is specific for SEA. For instance, if we were to look at King County International Airport, they have different types of uses. They certainly have cargo, but they have a lot more general aviation. They have a lot more hangarage on their airfield. So it's just, what are the main elements at each airport? And that's where your focus of planning is. So Andy, I think go to the next slide. So this map is quite busy, and it's what we call the long-term vision for our master plan. A master plan should look at about a 20-year horizon. And so we looked at the 20-year horizon. We run forecasts for activity within that horizon. And we look at what we would contemplate for redevelopment at the airport. For this map, what's really important to note is that the areas in color are the areas that are actually being worked on right now and studied. The areas in gray do show potential redevelopment. They're identified, but more planning would need to be carried forward, and anything in gray is not part of the environmental review that's underway. We looked at the further out picture, and then we pulled back and are studying what we would construct in the near term, and that's why it's called near-term projects. So I can spend a little bit of time on this map, and Andy, I guess if you want to use your cursor a little bit. So on the airfield, that's really just showing improvements to the taxiway runway system. And those are things that are maybe being done partly to meet FAA standards or to do improvements as aircraft move on and off the airfields. SEA is a very busy airport and it's a small airport. And so we are very, very efficient in how we move the aircraft. And I don't have to tell you that we're busy. You know that, and you live with it just as many of us do. So coming further down the map, towards the bottom of the map, right, all of those little funny triangle shaped things, those represent aircraft at a gate, or parked on the tarmac in a what we call a hard stand, which just means a parking position. So we're showing way out in the future how many gates we would construct to maintain safe and efficient operations. And if you'll show the blue leg of the proposed, so what Andy's marking right now is a proposed second terminal that we're studying right now. And that's the actual terminal. That's the gate part, what we would call a concourse, you know, like currently at the airport, we have A gates, B gates. So that would be the gates. And that little bridge goes down to that rectangle. Yes, thank you, Andy. That bridge connects to what is the terminal building, which is where you process people and bags, ticketing, baggage handling, that type of thing. The brown that's immediately in front of that rectangle, that's the roadway system that would feed that terminal building and then connect to the existing terminal building. So the brown are new roadways, or a realignment of our existing roadways. That's where Andy's cursor is right now, as we're studying moving the roads further to the east. And I think far over to the left, Andy, the fuel farm, the little red dots are an expansion of the fuel farm so that there are more tanks, because we expect more activity in the future. It also allows us the facility to provide sustainable aviation fuels. That's where the mixing area and storage would be, because the port is a big proponent of sustainable fuels, meaning moving away from strict Jet A and going to renewable fuels. And we have worked on that for several years and worked very hard so that it was included in the governor's low carbon fuel standards that were passed last year. Just to be clear, Andy, move a little bit further to the left over SASA. This gray area, again, remember the areas in gray are not being studied, are not being contemplated at this time. They were part of the planning process, but they would need more work in the future. So you see things there, you see planes or buildings, but it's grayed out. I just don't want people to be confused to think that everything on this map is what we would call live. And then at the very top of the map at about 12 o'clock, Andy, that is shown as a proposed relocation of the airport's maintenance facility, just in case you're wondering what that is. And we do we have a lot of maintenance work that we do. We maintain our own satellite train system, of course. We're running these facilities. We keep the snow equipment there and lots of field equipment. So it's a very busy part of the airport. And it's currently down where that blue L shape is for the gates, a little bit further. Yeah, right there. That's currently where the maintenance facility is. So we're proposing moving across the airfield. So sorry, that was a long walkthrough, but I just want to make sure people understand this is how we contemplate the long-term vision of the future needs at Seattle, and part of it's active and part of it's studied later. I think we can go to the next slide. So here's the same map, a little bit different scale, and these are the near-term projects. So in the near term, this is what we're looking at in environmental review, what we're proposing to develop for the immediate growth of the airport, meaning the forecasts that we see in the near term, and again within the 3 runway configuration. So these projects have come through the planning process. They've been proposed by the planning team, and now they're in environmental review, which is a separate team, and they'll be look at what planning proposes, and they analyze the possible environmental impact of the proposals. This is being done both through a federal process under the National Environmental Policy Act. Sorry, I think that was maybe just me echoing. And then since the airport is federally regulated, so we have both the federal process and by state law under SEPA or the State Environmental Policy Act. These are all labeled, but you can see that many of the things I talked about on the previous map. And again, we're looking at terminal needs. Andy's showing those. We're looking at the cargo needs over to the far right. Thank you, Andy, sort of in the gold and brown colors. We've got the road, the road network again in brown. And again, those are showing gates and parking positions along the both existing terminal and then the new concourse. And the again, the colored items that are on the airfield, those are improvements to taxiway system and aircraft movement areas to keep the airfield moving the aircraft through. So are there any questions about the planning work and the things that I've talked through in terms of the projects? Because now I'm going to switch and go to our outreach and engagement focus a little bit more.
Andy, if you could just take it down so we can look at the audience, see if they have questions. Folks don't necessarily use the chat box, so please take down the presentation for a quick minute so we can see. Any questions, everybody? You can take yourself off mute.
And it's,
Hey, oh, sorry.
It's fine if there aren't, we can keep going, no worries. We can come back to any of this, but just wanted to check in.
I have a question. I'd like to have you define near term. What time span are we talking? Is that the 20 years or is this what are you showing us?
Right, near term is really when we kicked off the planning process. Well, when we evolved to the near-term projects, it was envisioned to be about a 10-year time frame. But what's more important at our airport, I'll speak for our airport, is an activity level. So it's about when the airport needs to handle approximately 57 million annual passengers. We don't know exactly what year that will land. And I can tell you that COVID and the slowdown from COVID has greatly slowed the timeline that we were on. We had tremendous growth between 2014 and 2017. And then we slowed way down. You know, we lost 90% of our activity in 2020, and it's, you know, very slowly coming back. So we talked about when we need to serve 57 million annual passengers at an optimal or a comfortable level of service. That's what the near-term projects are designed to deliver for us.
There's a question in the chat box from Linda Wong. Linda, do you want to ask it? Do you want me to read it?
Sorry, I had to find the unmute button. Takes me a minute. So I saw that there were a lot of planes on the map, and I'm assuming that those are just potential spaces for them, right?
A lot of times they align with gates. And then sometimes we use what's called parking positions or hard stands. It just means it's a hardened area of pavement where the plane can park and not deteriorate the pavement, because of course they're very heavy. And you asked what type of aircraft would be at SEA, and it's generally very consistent with what we have now. And we have a very consistent what's called fleet mix of largely 737 type. That's our dominant type. We have some what are called regional jets, which are the smaller, about 70 seats, 30 to 70 seats. We do have international aircraft that would be 767s, 777s. We don't see 747s much, other than there's some cargo flight, because that's a very old aircraft. It's not very efficient for an airline to run any longer. And gates are designed to understand if you're parking a narrow body, which means a single aisle aircraft, or a wide body, which is a dual aisle aircraft. So if you've flown to Europe or Asia, you often are on a dual aisle aircraft. And
So-
we don't expect a lot of change in our fleet mix. We're designing, you do forecast it and look out, and we don't see things that radically change it. The gates we've planned are what we think will fit the mix that we expect to see.
So sort of middle to large planes.
I would say they're more middle. We predominantly are middle-sized, and we do accommodate, we have gates, wide body gates that are for large aircraft, but our fleet our traffic is very heavily domestic, and those aircraft size are middle-sized.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep, you bet. And there was another question about how does 57 million compare to 2019? We were at 50 million, just over 50 million annual passengers in 2019. We had double-digit growth in the previous 5 years. So we jumped up to that number much more quickly. And so that's where we were in 2019.
Could I ask a quick follow-up question? The projects, sort of to the near-term concept, were the projects shown in gray on your maps? Are those part of the near-term vision, like to meet the demand of 57 million? Or are those additional outside projects? And what is the timeline on those? Or they're not even imagined?
Right, they are not part of meeting the 57. So they're in gray, they are not part of it. And that timeline is speculative. I don't know what it would be. What we do know is we need and can accomplish the projects that are in the color. The other ones are forecasting for a larger capacity that we still have to do more work to understand what it would mean to go there. Anything else, Maria, or shall we continue?
It looks like people are at a good place to continue. Go ahead, please.
All right, Andy, back to you. And thank you for doing this, because I'm less talented on Zoom than Andy is. So, all right, so let's go to the next slide, Andy. So as I mentioned, we're in environmental review on those near-term projects, the projects in color, to understand the environmental impact from that proposed plan. We had hoped to publish pretty soon, by mid-year this year, but we're extending that schedule out further, so it'll land closer in the fall, which is, around third and fourth quarter. The FAA uses what's called a federal dashboard. It's a tracking website for all of the projects all over the US. And they have just updated the information on the federal dashboard that shows that they expect to be publishing by October 30th of this year, 2022. So they had originally hoped February, now it's October. So that's their estimate. And that's, so when we were coming to talk to you, we were still thinking about an earlier time frame. And so I want to just thank you for, I'm glad we're still here tonight, but we'll come back to you when it gets closer, because it'll be a little more relevant. But so the port will send notification of the schedule change and the update to the federal dashboard this week to several email lists that we maintain. If you aren't on the SAMP listserv or the NEPA SEPA listservs and you would like to be, please just let Andy know, or Maria, you can let Andy know, so we make sure that people are getting the information that they want. It's pretty easy to sign up. I think you can do it through the webpage, but if we need to help coordinate it for you, we certainly can do that. And Andy's got his email there, so you can contact him. So so the schedule is extended out a little bit further, but I think that we've got some important aspects of the upcoming outreach and engagement that we want to share with you. And so please just know this is the first of many opportunities over the next several months as we prepare for that publication. Let me talk a little bit about the revised schedule and why it's extended. We're extending it for several reasons since concluding scoping and beginning the analysis, which began in very early 2019. We finished scoping in 2018. And a sort of a short list of the primary reasons are in no particular order, but we certainly have had impacts from COVID, both from workload perspective and the effect on industry conditions, making sure that we're still accurately studying and things haven't changed. Both the port and the FAA have had personnel changes and retirements, which means transitioning the work to new people. We did go ahead and update the forecasts from the initial planning documents because of the schedule extending beyond what we had initially thought, and to make sure that the forecasts were accurate. And that work was presented to the commission, but it's already been a couple of years ago. We are pursuing agency consultation across a range of resource categories. And darn it, I probably didn't bring that list to you tonight, but we can follow up. But we've shown that before, and I can send it. But we look at air quality, water quality. There's about, I want to say 25 or more resource categories, and these are standard and consistent in any environmental review process. And so that agency consultation and with multiple agencies has to occur and be undertaken and completed before we publish. So that's why we are seeing extensions, but it's frustrating because we've been working on this for quite some time. But it's really important, first and foremost, that the environmental review is accurate and it has good data when the draft is published for public comment. That's the purpose of it. So we're working with FAA continuously to accomplish that and to make sure that while we couldn't anticipate all of the changing conditions we faced, we do what it takes to get good, complete information out to the public on this important plan. So I think I've noted that we've updated it, and we will come back, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But let me just go back a little bit again. Thank you, Andy. That's perfect. And just sort of remind folks or inform folks of where we've been, so that you have a sense of what public comment felt like during scoping. And then we're going to talk about what has changed. So let me cover that, and then I'll be kicking it over to Andy here pretty soon. So scoping, which is the process of, hey, we have a plan. We'd like you to comment on that plan and hear what's important to you, because then we're going to go into conducting environmental review on this proposed plan. And we want to hear what you want us to, where are the areas that you might have concern or you would like us to focus. That's my layman's description of scoping. We conducted that, and we did report out to the commission on the results of scoping, and let me cover a few of those things. We had an agency scoping meeting that had 7 different agencies there. We convened 4 public meetings to present information and collect official comment. And those were, we located those in different geographic areas around the airport. We had an online open house that was available in 5 languages. And we had communications to the public through postcards to residents. That was 14,000 postcards. That was to remind people, hey, this is underway. We hope you'll come out and provide comment. We have our airmail newsletter, which is a paper newsletter. It goes to over 90,000 residences. We used online and in paper advertisements and notifications about the meetings, and of course used email and social media to help communicate as well. And we also went to a variety of community events within the community with our material to say, please come to our scoping meetings and provide comment, because the comment has to be received at the meeting, the hosted meeting, to be official. And that's just part of the regulation, both for SEPA, the federal process, and NEPA, the federal process, and SEPA, the state process. So the result of that was we received several thousand comments. We had comments from 10 agencies and 750 plus people. They covered nearly 400 unique topics that were within 22 different types of categories. Could have been traffic, could have been air quality, but they had unique topics within these broader categories. The most common themes that we heard were around aviation demand, the forecast for that, and the alternatives that were looked at. And then we heard quite a bit about the desire to have the environmental review incorporate or reflect human health impacts in several resource categories, including air quality, water quality, noise, and hazardous materials standards. So let me talk a little bit about now what's on the slide in front of you. So during scoping, our engagement focused on general community outreach to stakeholders. And we hosted community meetings, we made presentations to city councils and to some other community groups. I know we did a presentation to the Beacon Hill Council, but I know I've been up here, but I can't remember if it was me that came up during planning or scoping, but that's just an example. We've been at other community councils as well. Those meetings were held in person. Those meetings were port hosted, and we set the date and the time. Obviously, we tried to be accommodating, but again, it was a fixed date and time. And separate, so that was the during scoping and the run up to scoping to drive outreach and commenting. Separate from scoping, we also performed some community outreach specific to several underrepresented communities, but we saw very limited engagement from those efforts. We did have different meetings, but the turnout was not as effective. And so we continue to coordinate with FAA through the development and the publication of the draft and the development of a robust engagement strategy. So what I'm saying tonight, I've already talked with FAA about, and they're aware of, but we've learned a lot from it. And I think it's really important. We want to share with you tonight what we've learned and what we want to incorporate going forward. And so, Andy, I'm going to turn this over to you, and you can go to the next slide, I think, and just kind of start there if that's okay. Flag me if you need something, but I'll turn it over to Andy to talk more specifically.
Great, thanks, Claire. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
So a lot's happened since 2018, and the port has really evolved our practices around equitable engagement. And this really is both in response to the COVID-19 crisis and the switch from really predominantly in-person meetings to virtual meetings. And it also really, I think, reflects a commitment from the Port Commission to really focus on equitable engagement and making sure that underrepresented communities have an equal seat at the table in public process. And so our planning for outreach for the SAMP NEPA EA will involve the learnings and best practices that we have really internalized over the last couple of years. I'm going to just move the slide forward just to make sure I'm in the right spot here before I go on. So just bear with me for a second here. And so what we see is that the virtual meetings that we have really piloted and also, not only that the port has conducted, but also from learning from our agency partners and other agencies across the country, we see a real strong increase in participation in these sorts of public processes when there is at least a virtual component to them. And so the virtual meeting format really not only reduces the likeliness of the transmission of COVID, but it also increases participation by reducing and easing access issues and supporting flexible schedules. And this would be in contrast to, as Claire mentioned, where the port is hosting events at a set time and location, and folks have to accommodate their schedules to get there. We have seen, however, that there still exists a digital divide, which can create barriers for those without broadband internet access. And so there are some techniques and strategies that we're working on to help to alleviate or accommodate for the digital divide that exists, one of which is utilizing a mobile-friendly platform for virtual meetings and supporting documents, which reduces that barrier to inclusivity. Additionally, one of the things that we've talked about with this group, I think it was an idea that came out of a presentation or a conversation we had a few months ago, was to look into the option to do hybrid activities where the port would host virtual meetings, and then we would look to community partners who have technology access spaces to potentially host in-person options for folks who have technology or access limitations. So that's another option that we are exploring to bridge this digital divide. And so to ensure equitable access to the public process, the port is planning to further advance and prepare materials and processes early to better reach underrepresented communities. And that was really the impetus for us beginning this process here today, talking about what this is going to look like so that we can really work in partnership with folks in Beacon Hill and other near airport communities in order to make sure that we have developed a robust and inclusive set of materials and processes. And we really feel that by centering the needs of the communities that have the most barriers, the end result is going to be a set of processes and products that are more accessible to all stakeholders. And this is really something that we have seen through other outreach that we have done by really focusing on those participants who have the most barriers. We create a better product and a better process for the community at whole. This work really helps underrepresented communities have the same access to information and materials and opportunity to know more about the SAMP near-term projects and comment on the work the port and the FAA will present. So I wanted to talk a little bit more specifically about some of the work we're doing and why we're starting early. We're really designing the engagement process to be accessible by identifying and removing barriers to participation, like I said a minute ago. And so what we're really starting to do now is to begin gathering information and building relationships. We will be translating translating information into multiple languages. And so we are evaluating based on demographic information and language information that we have, the top tier languages, and we'll be looking to stakeholders to inform us as to whether we're missing anything and help to fill some gaps there. There will be broad distribution of electronic and written materials, as well as designing materials, as I said, for mobile platform accessibility, making sure that folks don't need a high-powered computer and high-speed internet to access materials, that they could get what they need on their phone. We will also be including a variety of platforms and channels for meeting notifications, meeting materials distribution, and for gathering comments. We'll be including current stakeholders and broadening participation from underrepresented communities. We will be issuing a 30-day notice prior to the issuance of the draft to prepare for the comment period. This is to really give folks a heads up that it's coming and to make sure that they're prepared to engage. We'll be potentially identifying and supporting liaisons in underrepresented communities. These are trusted community members who can gain access and information to port resources and then bring that information into their communities, and whether that's information about meeting times and activities, whether it's sharing printed copies of information. This is a model that we have piloted for use under the South King County Fund that has been incredibly effective at helping to broaden the base of folks that we're interacting with and that we're engaging with. We'll be identifying participation opportunities on community schedules. So really, again, trying to come and meet folks where they are, as opposed to trying to drive traffic to port-sponsored events. We will also be doing presentations to city councils, including televised meetings. So these techniques are really based on a set of principles for equitable engagement that the port has been working on developing in conjunction with industry partners and with industry best practices. We really look forward to continuing to engage with the Beacon Hill Council and your constituents to ensure equitable access for SAMP and other public engagement processes in the future. And with that, I'd love to hand it back to Claire to close us out.
Okay, sorry, had to unmute there. I see that we have some questions in the chat, so let me just make sure to say thanks for the time tonight. We'll cover those questions and for letting us go in depth on some of the work that's to come and some important aspects of the upcoming publication. We will be back to present at another meeting as publication is nearer, and we were glad to stay on the agenda so that we could kind of kick this off. Appreciate your time tonight, but the schedule has moved out a little bit, so we're got some more time and we'll be circling back. And again, want to make sure that if people want notice about the publication or other communications, please, you can send your email to Andy or ask him how to do it, and he can send you a link. So covered that. And then Maria, back over to you. You can let me know how you want to proceed with questions and other information.
And if I could just jump in really quickly and just apologize, I was not monitoring the chat as I was talking. So if I missed something.
No, I'm going to be facilitating.
Okay, great. Thanks.
So I have some direct questions for you.
Okay.
I was not given a heads up that the SAMP introduction to FAA is going to be delayed. If we had known that, we would not have had this meeting, because the idea was, you guys, we were talking about, you've been talking about within a month or two, SAMP is going to come out, and you wanted to know, you wanted to get some feedback on your community engagement plan. And so now, like, I am wondering, what was your community engagement plan if SAMP was going to drop within 2 months, within a month or two? Because it sounds like you're starting from scratch and wanting us to help out with that. I mean, I wish you just had given me a heads up that SAMP is not happening.
Well, I will start by taking ownership there and apologizing. This came together fairly quickly last week as we received notification that the schedule was being extended. We have begun what I would really call a pretty robust planning process that's been in the works for really months now, but that we're unfortunately not really able to share until we're closer to the publication date. So I'm sorry, Maria, that I didn't follow that or close that loop to say that the delay is going to impact the presentation here tonight. I was really thinking that because we gave this is almost exactly the same presentation we gave to the START group last week, that it would only be fair to provide the same update to this group in the same capacity. And
Yeah, that's not the point. My point is that there was a big change. We should have been notified of that big change. Right? The big change is it's not being dropped within a month or two. It's going to be in the fall. And part of the frustration around this is we have been informed since 2018 that this was going to happen. So we've just been slogging through, and we have less resources than you guys. And also, so what I think would be constructive is if you send us the details of your community engagement plan, and we can provide you with better input. You know, it's not enough to say, we're going to reach out in these languages. Where are you going to reach out? How are you? And one of our community members online said, do you have a goal on outreach engagement numbers? If you don't meet that goal, it's no further action plan. The implication is if you don't have a goal, we really don't know if it's effective. And on this call are people from different communities, because, you know, they wanted to hear what was going to happen and how it's going to be done. So the other thing is just for everybody, because we have people who have been coming onto this issue in different stages. The scoping was done, what, 2 years ago, from my recollection. And Beacon Hill Council, we did give our scoping. We did it jointly with El Centro de la Raza and with I'm forgetting, there's another with 350. And basically what we had asked for, aside from the regular environmental assessment, is that we wanted an EIS, and we were told that that was going to happen. And we used the presidential order on environmental justice. So please confirm again if that's going to happen. That's what we were told.
Oh, well, thanks, Maria. I will have to take that back. I do not have information regarding any change in status regarding the NEPA between an environmental assessment versus an environmental impact statement under NEPA. I'm happy to take that back to FAA, and I'll the environmental justice process, that work. I'll need to get more information for you because I'm not familiar with.
The confirmation was from the Port of Seattle. I believe his last name it starts with R, the person who was running the SAMP process.
Arlen Purcell? Arlen is our
not Arlen. I would remember that. Well, for whatever, because I said it was in the scoping comments, it was in the summary as a unique feedback, and that we were told it was going to be part of it, because our goal is an EIS, and that goal is well known.
We are doing an EIS under SEPA. That's absolutely correct. Yeah. Yeah,
Well,
it's so
what would be the timing of that? Because what we're interested in is under NEPA, we don't want a finding of non-significance. We want to make sure we get an EIS.
SEPA will follow the NEPA process. So NEPA is wrapped up. It can sometimes be some of the elements can be incorporated, but there's more analysis, and the human health work is done under SEPA. That will be that's the later work and has the benefit of looking back at NEPA, seeing the comments, seeing where there's more work to be done. And again, the environmental impact statement is being prepared under SEPA. So you absolutely will have an EIS under SEPA.
There's a question on the chat box. I hear that noise complaints are logged, but that's as far as it goes. It has no further impact. Is that true?
So then we get comments both. We get thousands of comments, noise complaints. there's a app that people are able to register a complaint very, very easily. And literally we have thousands of complaints. They're responding to scheduled aircraft. What we're doing is pursuing other ways of reducing noise. The fact that the aircraft that are coming in and out are creating noise complaints is well known to us. We've talked with one of the cargo operators about upgrading their nighttime cargo flights. They are indeed going to change the aircraft out, and we're pursuing those comments with a second carrier as well, and with FedEx. We have carriers that have greatly reduced their arrivals and use of the third runway at night, and all of those things have happened. So it's not the number of complaints that will trigger the action. We pursue it regardless of whether we have 2,000 complaints as we did 5 years ago, or 10,000 complaints as we have this past year, or 2019 perhaps.
Any other questions, guys?
Can I ask one?
Yes, please.
So I'm Kent Polisar. I moved from SeaTac. Now I'm down in Edgewood. I think I met you before. Anyway, so they're going to be measuring pollution. Is that what I'm hearing, or what's the process, and who's going to be measuring this pollution? I guess I'm just kind of wondering about that.
Sure. And I'm not your best resource, Kent, but happy to take away some questions that I'm not going to be very skilled in answering. But under the environmental review process, they look at different types of pollution or impacts: air quality, water quality, noise, traffic. There are multiple resource categories, and so that analysis, that we conduct an analysis, and it's our prime consultant is Landrum and Brown, is the team that leads the analysis, and then they use a number of sub-consultants. Some are based here in Washington State, some are from other parts of the country, and so the way that those impacts are measured would differ obviously from the different types of categories, right? Water quality is one type of standard, air quality is, but they're looked at individually and studied and analyzed, and so the report will show that analysis in each of those resource areas.
What about soil?
Soil is in there, yeah.
Good.
Sorry, and wellhead protections in there. I learn all kinds of things every time I look at that list.
Because there has been some information we're getting from the University of Washington, especially around ultrafines and things like that. Are they going to be consulting with those people too, or?
I don't know, but that work is well known to us, and as you might recall, we helped fund some part of the UFP study, and we've hosted presentations from Dr. Sato and others. So I can't tell you what's in the analysis, but it is well known to us.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm also just wondering if there's like some kind of pollution cap, because you talked about expanding, the pollution basically. And, the SAFs reduce some, but it doesn't sound like, what I'm hearing is like 10%, maybe by 2030, something along those lines.
Okay.
And if you're expanding, by almost 10% probably by 2030, it's not beneficial ultimately. So I'm just wondering, where the standards are coming from, and what, if it was too much for the environment, would you cut back on number of planes?
So those are that's the type of complete analysis that's expected and is supposed to come forward from the environmental review. And it would look at if you did nothing, which is called a no action, meaning no project proposal, versus what you've proposed. And the environmental review team also looks at, well, what if there's something else? Maybe you didn't propose it, but maybe there's a better way of accomplishing what you're trying to manage. So you will see that range of information in the
Good.
draft when it's published.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be fun at some point to talk to somebody who's, you know, putting that together, like, you know, who has more information. So if you want to give them my name, go for it.
Okay.
Claire, I have a follow-up question from Ken regarding the human impacts. The public health study is talking about a geographical 10-mile radius. Is your assessment going to include a 10-mile radius?
I don't have any specifics, Maria, that I can speak to what's in the analysis, but I'll take that back. But I don't have information regarding what's happening within the analysis. But we're certainly aware of this study. Yeah.
Okay. I'm looking around. Any other questions, please? Okay.
So Maria, to your earlier comments, and I do apologize if this has not been useful, and it sounds like we should have just been very clear with you about the timeline and asked whether you wanted us to come or not. And I'm sorry to say that because we were at START and we had this booked and we felt that it would be constructive. So let me just say we'll be more thorough and make sure to ask that question. I do think that we are not starting out. We do have a lot of work underway. We've got a consultant team that is helping us identify how we will primarily improve on reaching underrepresented communities because the standard approach is well known to us and not as much of a gap in knowledge. And but we certainly, however it works best to have you engage, I'm going to know that Andy and Nate Caminos are regularly with the council and with you, and we can bring back something more formal and ask for comments, but know that we will do that and look forward to your comments and your review and make it in a way that I hope is not burdensome. That's certainly not our intent at all. And I thank you for your direct comments tonight. I'm always glad that when we have an opportunity to learn more and do better. That's why we're here. So
yeah, as much as the meeting is discouraging, we always appreciate the relationship that we have built with the port. I just want to openly recognize that from the feedback that we've given in terms of having equitable outreach, this is the port demonstrating its effort. We would like to see it when it's more formed, because it sounds like a bunch of principles. And I think we can give more specific feedback at that point.
great. Thank you.
So with that, I'm just going to go ahead and say thank you for coming. And then for the rest of us, we're going to have some discussion about what we're going to do.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening. Thanks again, Maria.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for having us, and look forward to engaging next time. Bye-bye.